Welcome. Bruchim Habaim. My name is Donna Friedman Mayer, and I am the chair of Limmud, of the board of Limmud North America, and your co-chair for today's gala. It is my honor to share this this stage, with Shep Rosenman, the founding board chair of this beloved organization. I am loving that studio, Shep. It is
Me too.
I wish I could be there. It is such a joy to see so many familiar faces and new faces on this gathering today, including so many leaders and engaged learners in our community. And we are literally spanning the globe, from New York City to LA to Jerusalem and beyond. I invite you now to take a moment to look through the screens and do a little virtual mingling. If you see a familiar face, maybe say hello in the chat. And if you don't, perhaps welcome a stranger. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to really do that. It's an extraordinary gathering today.
Some folks may not technically know how to do that. Can you expand on that?
Sure. So if you check on the three little dots in your box, you can just hit on chat, or you can go to the chat function and find someone, or you can just wave. So my primary job today is to say thank you. First, to our board and host committee, without whom you all wouldn't be here today. To our esteemed panelists, who I know will challenge and inspire us today. To all of you who purchase ads to support this event and honor Yaffa with your love. And all of you who have already given so generously to support Limmud North America through this event. Thank you. Toda Rabba. As you all know, we are here to honor the extraordinary Rabba Yaffa Epstein, who has made a profound and lasting impact, not just on Limmud North America, but on so many of us personally. The theme of today's event is One People, Many Perspectives, pluralism in our polarized times, as these are values that both Yaffa and Limmud are dedicated to, and which speak to the unique opportunity we have as Limmud North America to meet this intense moment in the history of our Jewish people. In keeping with Limmud's value of everyone is a teacher and everyone is a learner, we want to start today by asking you all, what does pluralism mean to you? So we've just put a link in the chat, and in a word or a phrase, please answer, what does pluralism mean to you? And so you'll see that's going to start populating. And while it does, I will give you a brief rundown of what you are in store at our gala today. First, we will hear from Rabbi David Singer, the CEO of Limmud North America. Next, our impressive panelists will dive deeply into discussion about pluralism and what role it can play to heal our people in these broken times. Next, we'll raise our glasses to Yaffa. Yes, please, all of you, have those signature cocktails ready before being treated to some wisdom from Yaffa herself. Yaffa will also introduce the new rabbinic program we will be launching, thanks to all of your generous donations today. And then we will say shalom and lahitraot. But before I pass the virtual baton to David, let's take a look at what you all shared about pluralism. Chelsea. Diversity, tolerance, respect, openness. Ooh, I love space making, inclusivity, inclusion. Ooh, principled engagement. All right, well, thank you. So, I mean, I guess we're going to hear a lot more about what it means in a moment to the people who live it and work it every single day. Thank you for contributing. And now that we have set the table with your thoughts, it is my true privilege to introduce Rabbi David Singer, CEO and Chief Inspirer of Limmud North America.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Shep. Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning, this afternoon, this evening, depending on where you are. I want to start by saying something simple, but not at all obvious. Your presence here matters. Not just to Limmud, not just to Yaffa, but to the kind of Jewish community we're trying to build and protect right now. We named this event One People, Many Perspectives, Pluralism in Our Polarized Times. And that title is not aspirational. It's descriptive. It's diagnostic. And frankly, it's a little bit defiant. Because we're living in a moment when difference has become dangerous, when disagreement has become disqualifying, and too often the loudest voices insist that there's only one way to belong. Limmud exists to push back against that idea, not by flattening differences, not by avoiding hard conversations, but by insisting that learning across difference is not a liability, it's our greatest strength. Pluralism, as we understand it, is not anything goes. It's not relativism. It's certainly not conflict avoidance. Pluralism is the disciplined practice of staying in relationship when it would be easier for us to walk away. It's the choice to listen when we'd rather persuade. And it's the courage to say, I don't agree with you, you still belong here. That has been Limmud's work from the beginning. And in this moment, across North America, it's more essential than ever. Limmud creates spaces where everyone is able to bring their full selves, places where disagreement is expected and curiosity is required, where no one checks their politics, theology, or identity at the door, but everyone checks their certainty. If that sounds hard, it's because it is. But it's also joyful and transformative and enriching and deeply Jewish. Which brings me to Yaffa. Today, we will honor Yaffa Epstein, not only for what she's given to Limmud, though that list is long and extraordinary, but for what she continues to model for all of us. Yaffa embodies pluralism not as a slogan, but as a way of being in the world, as a learner, as a teacher, as a lay leader who has consistently chosen relationship over righteousness and depth over simplicity. And perhaps most importantly, Yaffa always understands that pluralism doesn't happen by accident. It requires intention, it requires courage, and it requires mentors, which is why today's conversation is so meaningful. The panel you're about to hear brings together three of Yaffa's mentors, each a leader in their own right, each deeply committed to pluralism and education, and each helping shape institutions that take difference seriously without letting it tear communities apart. This is not a theoretical conversation. It's not an abstraction. It's about leadership choices, moral tension, and what it actually takes to hold space when the stakes are real. And that's why this conversation sits so squarely at the heart of Limmud's mission. Limmud does not tell people what to think. We work relentlessly on how to think together. We convene communities, we train educators, we build platforms where people encounter ideas and each other that they did not expect but desperately need. And none of this happens without people like you, who believe that Jewish life is strongest not when we all agree, but when we are all committed to staying in the conversation. So thank you. Thank you for being part of that commitment with us. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the person who will guide this conversation with wisdom, warmth, and just the right amount of gentle provocation, Eliana Leader, former board chair of Limmud North America, who will be moderating today's panel. Eliana, thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, David. And thank you to all of you and welcome. It is a real gift to gather in a space like this with warmth and even virtually, being rooted in the belief that being in conversation together is not just a method, but it's actually a value, and one that Yaffa really leads in. Today's conversation, it's about pluralism, but not as a slogan, more as a lived-in practice that shapes Jewish leadership, education, and communal life. And we're incredibly fortunate to explore this with three unbelievable leaders who wrestle with these questions every day. So we are joined by Rabbi B. Elka Abrahamson, president of the Wexner Foundation, a deeply respected leader, teacher and advisor, student of Musar, whose work is grounded in developing Jewish leaders of character and conviction. Also with us is Rabbi Leon Morris, president of the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies, a lifelong champion of serious Jewish learning in liberal contexts, and a key voice in rethinking the role of mitzvot, text, and meaning in contemporary Jewish life. We are also joined by Stephen Jacobson, executive director of the Dorot Foundation, whose decades of work in leadership, development, experiential education, and mentoring have shaped generations of Jewish educators and communal professionals. So as I moderate, I'm going to invite everyone to put your own questions for our panelists into the chat. They're going to be collected, and we'll have some time for guest Q&A at the end. So I'm going to get us on the clock, make sure I am respecting our time together. And we're going to get started. Why is our topic pluralism? It is something that our four organizations share. I will be here reflecting on Limmud North America. Limmud North America is committed, in fact, to the premise that Jewish learning and community are strongest not when we agree, but when we show up with respectful curiosity about our differences, like David was just speaking about. Limmud doesn't ask us to dilute what we believe. It asks us to learn with one another and use those differences for the purposes of what we call machloket l'shem shamayim, or arguments for the sake of heaven, also elevated discourse. My hope is that this conversation doesn't try to resolve pluralism. That is not happening today for anybody who thought that that's what the call was for, but rather modeling it through thoughtful, honest discussion. So with that framing, I want to start at the foundation, and I want to also acknowledge that at Limmud, we leave titles at the door in order to make our relationships and our conversations and our learning more equitable. So I will be speaking to each of our panelists by first name. So jumping right in, I want to start at the foundation, which is that pluralism is a word that we all use, but not always in the same way. So I'd love to begin by asking each of you, but Leon, if I can pick on you to go first. When you use the word pluralism, what do you mean? And what do you explicitly not mean?
Great. First of all, I just want to say it's such an honor to participate and to pay tribute to Yaffa and the amazing Torah that she's brought to Limmud North America and to Wexner and to Pardes and to Dorot and to so many institutions. For me, pluralism means owning the fact that I don't have the complete truth. I have convictions. I can express very strong positions. But even then, there is a sense that I don't have access to the entire truth. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, Alav Hashalom, said in Dignity of Difference, he wrote that in heaven there's truth with a capital T, but here on earth there are only truths with a lowercase t and in the plural. And I think that's a real guiding piece for me. I wanted to bring in just one of Pardes's favorite midrashim when it comes to this, which is kind of a lesser known midrash that it's from Midrash Tehillim, and there's a version of it in the Jerusalem Talmud as well, in which Moses is told by God that the Torah is not going to be given to him in a clear cut manner. Rather, God says to Moses, for everything that I'm going to command you, there are going to be 49 reasons that the matter could be pure and 49 reasons that the matter could be impure. And we think a lot about that. What does it mean that when you're in a conflict with two sides, the two sides don't add up to 100, that neither of the halves have the whole truth? We might have 49, but not 50. We don't have the full revelation. We feel principled. We feel passionate about our position, but something is missing. And I think that when you're in a discussion, in a mahloket l'shem shamayim, in a disagreement for the sake of heaven, when there's 49 versus 49, there's what to learn and what to talk about. When it's 50 versus 50 and each person is convinced that they have the entire truth, then there's really no relationship there. There's no movement. There's no growth. There's no learning. And so we're striving for relationships that are at least 49 versus 49. That's part of what pluralism means for me.
That's beautiful. Elka, what are your thoughts there?
Good afternoon, morning, evening, depending on where you are. I have a variety of prepared remarks laid out before me. And as this has gone in 20 minutes, like 20 things have popped in ahead of the things I was going to say. So I'm going to start with some of the things that popped in. One of them is I'm sitting with a very heavy heart. I'm from Minnesota. I was raised in Minnesota. Those streets are my streets. And to be talking about understanding each other and understanding words when we're being told to believe lies and not our eyes is crushing my heart. So this conversation sits next to me, but not in this conversation, but I couldn't begin without sharing that reality that I'm in. And just my people are suffering, our people are suffering. And I also want to talk about Yaffa for a minute, as Leon did, as friend, teacher, and colleague, because what I've been thinking about the last 24 hours is not just what pluralism is, but who pluralists are. And that, I would like to yield all my time, and I won't, and have Yaffa talk about what is it in her history that allows someone like her to be so coveted to someone like me. Our truths are different, but I think that in so many ways, I feel, Leon, like it's not that my truth isn't total, because I think in some ways mine is, but that so is yours, and that we can coexist in the same room with our authentic expressions of Jewish life and still be okay. And I'm seeing a lot of names on this call that are familiar, and it's not an accident that pluralists find spaces to express that part of themselves. And that if today I could ask for one thing, it's that we could each push our circles out and invite someone new in to talk about why it's okay to sit with someone whose truth isn't just like yours. And we learned from adaptive leadership something very powerful that I used to think was not so important, and now I think it's vitally important. And the adaptive leadership teachers, Marty and Ron, talk about it like when we're in rooms with people who aren't like us in Jewish spaces, we're all getting into this stew, right? I think they call it a stew or a soup. And we get in the soup as a certain vegetable. And they use that metaphor. And they talk about, I'm jumping in the soup as a potato, and you're jumping into the soup as a zucchini. And the fear we all have is that some of our flavors might influence the other, and the total pot is going to look different. And that is absolutely beautiful. So that everything that comes from our truths, when it mixes with others, if you're really coming in here, I will use the text, with the heart of many rooms, right? Something is going to be stirred in you that's different. And that's when something actually new is created. And it just may mean, and here's why I think people fear pluralism, it might mean I have to give up something that I've held on to my entire life. And that's why I go back to Yaffa, wondering, what is it in the stories she told and the people she encountered, in the ways of her being, that allowed her to do that? And I would ask that of all of you. Like, what's the moment where you said, you know what? I can sit in the room with a Jew who is so different from me, opposite of me, and I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to learn something. And I think when all is said is done, it comes from really sitting with a posture of curiosity over judgment. And if I'm sort of bringing anything into these last chapters of human history, it's sit with curiosity over judgment as often as you can, and it's not easy. So that is nothing of what I prepared, and I hope that that's okay, but we have more time.
It's even better because part of this is about, right, understanding our truths that come out of this shared discourse and space. So with that, I'm curious if Stephen's also sticking with his original, or he's reflecting back on what he's heard here about pluralism.
No, I'm definitely reacting. Largely, Elka, to your appreciation of Yaffa. I think part of what is so beautiful about Yaffa as an individual, as a teacher, and as a learner is that she combines the necessary humility and self-confidence, and confidence in the tradition and in the text and that which she's teaching, so as to be able to tolerate a multiplicity of voices. I heard recently a similar kind of paradigm, not humility and self-confidence, but self-love and self-critique. And it strikes me like the two peteks that were the notes that were instructed by the rabbis to keep in our pockets, that on the one hand were nothing but dust, and on the other, the world was created for me, for each of us. And I think part of what makes Elke, your notion that we are changed or potentially changed by a serious exchange of ideas, I think is part of what makes pluralism so difficult in practice. We all value it, but it's very hard actually to accomplish. And I think it's because of that fear that we ourselves will be changed by it, which is why I draw upon this lesson of the two notes. I think in the experience of learning with others, particularly others who are very different from ourselves, I think we have to be able to draw upon self-love when that's called for, and self-criticism when that's what's called for. And I'm very focused on skill building, and I think few of us really learn how to engage productively, generatively in that kind of experience.
I have to add that, we teach that managing change is actually fundamentally about managing loss. And, every time you're in a room with someone who is really different than you, that you're just not sure what the outcome is going to be, there may be some losses, even if they're ones that you probably should lose. And that's just hard for human beings.
It's interesting what I'm gathering here, right? We started by talking about pluralism kind of as a definitive character trait or a way of creating community, but I'm also really hearing from each of your answers pluralism as an educational bedrock as well, right? Limmud, as well as each of your organizations, are built on the idea that being together in conversation is itself transformative. And I'm curious how you find pluralism to be especially powerful or necessary as an educational framework and not just as a communal one. How do you think that kind of impacts our ability to then create through the lens of pluralism? And any of you can start there.
Well, I'm thinking of two aspects. One goes back to this modesty and curiosity, the root of the curiosity being that we don't have access to the whole truth. One of my teachers 30 some years ago, Marc-Alain Wachnine, he's French, and he was playing with a lot of ideas from French philosophy, and Derrida and others, and he said, the difference between, in our case, Judaism and idolatry, ancient idolatry, is the idol. You can hold it in your hand, you can grasp it, you know exactly what's there because you have access to it. And the whole idea of an invisible, abstract God is that you can never grab it, you can never grasp it. It's elusive, it's it's impossible to concretize. And so that creates a situation like in an educational environment where everyone's opinion really factors in here. And that together we're going to be able to not grasp, but like caress the truth, this elusive truth that keeps kind of disappearing. But the other piece I'm thinking about in an educational setting is about how we complement each other, right? All these different voices in the room, and there's different sensibilities. People are really different. And I think particularly when I'm thinking about an environment like Limmud, and I'm thinking about, what are the potential fault lines that turn out not to be fault lines in this beautifully pluralistic environment? It's really between liberals and traditionalists. And the dynamic that's created is a really complementary dynamic. There's a teacher and colleague of mine, Michael Marmer, brings this story that's attributed to the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, that the reason the Amidah says Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu, our God and the God of our fathers, is that there's people who are just more God of our fathers, God of our ancestors oriented. They're just predisposed to a love toward tradition and a reluctance to change. And then there's the other camp that is more predisposed to the Eloheinu camp. I want God to be our God, the God that we need right now for this moment, in this moment of change. And Michael Marmer's written that we actually need both. We need both. We need both voices. We need the traditionalists and we need the liberals, and we need that dynamic between them. And it's that dynamic of finding ourselves somewhere in this spectrum in the middle that only comes from an educational setting where you have both of these groups of voices.
I'll just add to that, and I thank Leon for that. The Talmud teaches that iron sharpens iron, right? That when we come up against each other, we're both sharper because we've had that encounter. And I think it's important to share that it isn't easy. It's really hard, and at Wexner, we have the unique privilege of curating our groups, and everyone who comes to the table to apply for our programs, of course, tells us they're a pluralist. You'd be foolish not to tell us what a great pluralist you are if you're trying to join one of our cohorts. But then sitting in the room, what it actually means to them and what they thought they were coming to, which was, I'm just going to tell you what I think, and then we can go on, right? That we discovered, and Yaffa did a lot of work, and I see Tali Zelkowitz on this call, who's done a lot of work on that. We've had to actually walk people through the exercise of becoming, of having a pluralist mindset. And it's deliberate and it's slow. And I think that has become increasingly hard. We used to talk about a big tent. I've come to talk about a tent that's big enough. That, I heard Sharon Brous talk about a medium tent, that we no longer may have the the luxury of this grand tent right now. We have to talk among people who demonstrate the capacity to learn the skill of being a pluralist, to learn the skills of listening and a willingness to be sharpened by another. And I don't know, it would be another call to talk about how Pardes, how Limmud, how Dorot teach the art of pluralism, because you can't just throw folks in a room and, say, all right, everyone, now we're pluralists. But it's really an intentional set of behaviors that I think we, for a while, we were all getting better at naturally. And I think now in the Jewish community, I think we've all sort of moved away from that. And I'll just mention, experientially, we just had a large mission to Israel from Columbus, Ohio, 200 members of our Jewish community, and all of the rabbis from all of the synagogues. We actually flew a plane from Columbus, Ohio, direct to Tel Aviv, that flight that you can always jump on anytime. And it was the work that went unseen prior to the trip to create a mission where everybody could feel comfortable was just hours and hours of really deliberate and hard conversations that resulted in a trip where everyone felt included. But it's that pre-work that is so hard and requires such deliberate and thoughtful, intentional exercises and work. And we all need to do that.
That's right. I'd like to sign up for the session where we can compare notes on how we teach the discipline of pluralism, in large part because it has become so difficult and so challenging. That I think the metaphor of the tent having been wide and now necessarily being smaller is commentary on just how challenging pluralism is, as is the exercise of remaining open to be influenced by those with whom you fundamentally disagree. And here I want to draw upon something that Leon said about liberals and traditionalists, and add that while it's not a perfect description of what I think differentiates us from one another, I think it behooves us to identify the generational component, which I think highlights something that Elke pointed to, which is that we are, in fact, very different from one another. And I think part of the value of drawing upon the generational differences is being able to identify that the fabric of my reality and what shaped me is entirely different than that of my adult children. So it's reasonable to expect, therefore, that their understanding of experience, their understanding of all of creation is going to be vastly different than my own. And we have to take that really seriously, while not, this is where it's so important to me that we talk about confidence in addition to humility, self-love in addition to self-critique, because I don't want to lose myself and who I am and how I was shaped in that exchange. That's that's where the principle of pluralism extends to the very difficult discipline of pluralism.
Steve, I love that you made a midrash of that Baal Shem Tov story, that those who are saying the God of our ancestors, it's the older generation that's kind of digging in its heels, and the ones who are saying, Eloheinu, our God, are saying, no, we have to work this out for ourselves, our generation.
I also, not just for ourselves, but when you talk about the polarization of the extremes, and I'm sure both Steve and Leon, and probably Eliana, you as well, have had that moment when you're in one of these spaces, when I'm at a Wexner event and you at your events, and someone who you really view as the extreme difference from you approaches you to discover how alike you are, right? And it shouldn't be more affirming than other discoveries in our communities, but in the depths of my heart, I feel like what an accomplishment, that someone who really, I'm not going to, and I could name names, I have so many of these stories. But what I'll just highlight is when years ago, a very observant fellow came to me, really sort of devastated that she had spent her life believing that liberal Jews weren't serious. She said, I knew they weren't observant. I knew they didn't know the same Torah. All the things she knew, she said, I didn't know they were serious Jews. And I'm so embarrassed that I didn't know that. And we talked about how could she know it unless you had the experience. But that moment is so powerful. And to separate, serious Judaism from how I practice Judaism. So I just wanted to gloss on that as well.
I want this convert, like you're doing such an incredible job kind of saying a yes and to one another. And I'd like you to keep going, but you're all three of you are really jumping on something that I'm thinking about and would love for you to include in your answers. Because what you're saying, right, Elka, I always think of this visual at a Limmud retreat that as an aside, I'm the director of the retreat center at Ramat Rome. So I'm creating these spectrum serving spaces, and having had Limmud in this space, having someone who was literally coming out of the same Torah class, one wearing a black hat and a suit, and the other one being a female with tattoos in a tank top. And then after class, they're sitting there and they're talking to each other about all the fascinating opinions that they brought in the class, and they wanted to continue learning from one another, I think is really what all of you are touching upon, because we're not only, and your organizations in particular are noting, you're not only teaching pluralism, right? So you're also curating future leaders of the Jewish people, rabbis, Jewish educators who not only need to feel this for themselves, but they also need to be learning and leading in these pluralistic environments. And so I'm curious, not only why, and I think you've shared kind of why that educational framework is there and it helps so many, but what do you think also, how does it also help and support the leaders and the educators for being better at their work, and demand more from them than perhaps a more homogenous space would?
Well, I think the root of pluralism in some ways is about how much is expected of us. It's impossible to talk about Jewish pluralism without thinking of our teacher, Yitz Greenberg. And, his idea is that as God becomes increasingly hidden in the world as time progresses, the authority, that the responsibility that's granted to human beings then increases. And as soon as the authority of human beings increases, then humans have to exercise a lot of judgment. And we're going to have big disagreements over how to exercise that judgment. And so, it's that increased responsibility with God going sort of contracting more and more that leads to disagreement.
Yeah, I'll add that I'm a big fan of learning for learning's sake. Torah Lishma has its place, and specifically within the context of Dorot and the Dorot Fellowship in particular, we're looking to develop individuals who have the capacity to lead social change. And pluralistic learning environments provide the the platform from which to be able to develop the skills necessary to engage in environments where there are indeed multiple voices. God's creation is vast, and as Leon pointed to early in this conversation, there are deep differences among us. When Elka mentioned Minneapolis, my first thought was that the vast majority of us on this call, I imagine, have similar feelings and similar thoughts about what's happening there. And I am curious about those who feel aggrieved by circumstances that are well beyond their control, with whom we might not share all that much. And I think that the spiritual technology of Chevruta, that is the foundation for Jewish learning, forces us to be in deep relationship with the other. And I think that's an important variable insofar as our capacity is concerned to reach across differences. That happens most productively, and I think most often, in the context of real relationships that demand respect first and foremost, and often, despite our differences and maybe because of them, lead also to a love of the other. From that place, it becomes significantly more likely that we could bridge differences. And in our instruction of leadership skills over many years, one thing that I've noted in recent years is that some of the most impressive forms of leadership recently are those who exercise leadership by being either bridge builders or boundary crossers, which I think is a direct outgrowth of just how challenging it's become to, in fact, reach across to the other and do so generatively and productively.
I want to make sure that we are leaving a few minutes to any of the questions that have been coming in from our guests. So I want to end on one question that I think really ties in a lot of what we've been saying. And Elka, I want to ask you to start, both to be able to give you the opportunity to reflect on what Leon and Steve were just saying, but you really started this conversation reflecting on the current moment. And I think between what is happening in our country and what's been happening in Israel, and there's a lot of people's personal truths versus facts and all of these things that are part of our current world right now, Jewishly, non-Jewishly, and such. And I'm curious, what role do you feel that pluralism plays in sustaining our Jewish peoplehood today? We talked about, a medium-sized tent, perhaps, instead of a big, wide, everything goes tent. So it's possible that, right, there is a frame within what pluralism should mean and how it should be able to frame healthy debate, right? And where might it fall short? And so I'm curious, in this current moment, how you feel about that role that pluralism is playing as we continue moving forward as a people. Just an easy softball there.
Yeah, no, I'll just say it's not only is it hard and intentional, but it's slow. And I think that with the monumental crises that sit in front of us and in us, that slowness is frustrating. And I think we just have to live with that pace, and that we have to pick the lane where we can actually, generate meaningful change and stay in it. I think that there's this temptation to, widen everything. We've been asked a million times, why don't we have 100 Wexner groups and not just the number that we have? And we know that we couldn't do the same work with those numbers. And I know that, I don't know, Leanne, what the number is when the doors of the house of study would blow open and you couldn't do the same work. I'll leave that for another conversation. But I'm just going to keep going with the textual metaphor, just because sometimes they're so much easier with these big questions. There's a beautiful midrash that follows it's in the Talmud. It follows the iron sharpens iron. It uses a metaphor of a small piece of wood can ignite a larger piece of wood. Camper that I am, I often think of the tender art of building a campfire. And you always start with small pieces. And two things can happen, right? All those small pieces can smother, right, the fire, and you have to start again. But if you build it very, very slowly with each piece going on, eventually you have, a massive flame. And I think the answer is we have to just keep adding small pieces of wood, small understandings that keep building to larger understandings. And I think that's how you build a pluralist. And I really want to return to that it is pluralists who create pluralism and not the opposite, I don't think. Maybe it's a catch-22 that we're in this cycle, but I just want to emphasize the beauty of the slowness and the power of the flame.
Amen. Steve, any thoughts there? Leon, I want to make sure all of you have a chance to have that last thought of, if I'm going to impart anything about pluralism, I cannot leave without saying this. So
yeah, I want to pick up on Elka's notion of slowness. I think that's absolutely right. And again, I hate to keep coming back to what makes this all so difficult, but it's necessarily slow work. That's true in developing pluralists, and it's true in social change. And the challenge in that is that the needs are so urgent. So it feels terribly unsatisfying to say that we're going to meet urgent critical needs with slow progress. That's part of what makes this all so challenging.
I want to say that I think what we should aspire to in creating these pluralistic Jews is to really redefine what we mean by Ahavat Yisrael, a love of the Jewish people. And I think we need to begin to promulgate a definition of Ahavat Yisrael, which is all about appreciating and loving the variety of expressions and viewpoints that Jews have, the variety of ways in which Judaism is lived. And that should be the litmus test for, this is an Ohev Yisrael. This person is a lover of the Jewish people in all of its forms. And when we kind of expand outward and we see the notion of the Jewish people as Knesset Yisrael, as this one body vis-a-vis our relationship with the universe or our relationship with God, you need a lot of different parts of that body. You need a lot of different organs. And I think we need that big perspective. How do we appear as a people from God's perspective? And there, the variety, I think, is a real source of strength, a real source of a healthy body of Knesset Yisrael.
And I want to add one thing to that, Leon, which I speak very personally, and I know that I've heard it thousands of times from our fellows, members, and alumni. Judaism is more exciting when you have heard how Judaism is understood from someone who sees it so different. Even if it doesn't change you, it is a much more vibrant, interesting, intriguing set of values when you are turning it. I mean, it's just less boring. It's less routine. It's interrupted. And that's also healthy for us to be in that kind of crackling space. And if it's not at these institutions, it's at our Shabbat tables. Someone asks, where do you start? Invite the other, for Shabbos. You can do that. We can do that. So, And I do want to add, because I'm watching the time, I know I started out on a very low note, but I have to say that all of you and these kinds of conversations just lift me so much, and they do bring me hope. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate that you are all respecting this time, and this is such juicy Torah. And interestingly, thank you to David Singer, who has been kind of culminating the questions that have been coming in into themes for me. You have actually touched on several of them around how we might utilize this same language about community or educational forums, about political forums, right? Where some of these principles overlap. Do you, just to touch upon that from some of our guest questions that were wondering the same, do you feel that the principles can directly apply when we talk about politics or a political forum, either in Jewish community or representing the Jewish community outside? Do you think that that's possible, or is there a shift in the message that you're sending if that's the question?
It's so much harder because I think at this moment in history, many of us are much more passionate about politics than about, let's say, the ideology of faith. One of our teachers, one of my colleagues, Tzvi Hirschfield, made the most amazing observation that, in the Torah itself, your political opponents are the idolaters, and there's zero tolerance for them in the Torah. You overturn, you uproot their sanctuaries, you drive them out, you kill them. But by the time you get to the rabbis, there's a much more tolerant view of my ideological opponent. They're the idolaters who live next door to you in Sipori. And there's a whole tractate of the Talmud about your relationships with them. And you can give them gifts, and you can have relationships with them. And what's happening now is that was progress from the Torah to the rabbis in terms of how we deal with our opponent, our ideological opponent. And what we're seeing now is that we're actually going backwards. We as a society are abandoning this very tolerant rabbinic way of dealing with your ideological opponent. And we're saying, no, let's go back to the Torah's approach and utterly destroy them. So I think all of this, the kind of lifting up the rabbinic model, is really, really important at this moment.
Yeah.
I'll just share a little bit of I don't know. I work really hard to bring curiosity into every conversation, even with those that, Stephen, you referenced, who may have bristled at my opening. Like, I am curious, but I think curiosity has limits, and my limits are being tested. I don't know what else to say to that, except and then I'll end this call and I'll go back to work on those little sticks of fire. I mean, that's the best I can do, and it sometimes feels really like not enough. And my phone's blowing up as we speak with, what else we can do. So I'm curious what everyone will tell me to do. But I feel tested outside of my precious Wexner conversations that still inspire me, but it's really hard. And you still bring me hope. I don't want to end there.
Yeah, I don't know that that identifying the depth of the challenge means necessarily that we're hopeless. I think there's ample evidence throughout Jewish history that we're capable of doing hard things, and that those challenges, when we are tested, can bring out the best in us if we allow them to. And here I just want to note that the organizations who are represented here, and Limmud itself, of course, I think have become somewhat countercultural in the Jewish ecosystem. to the degree that we continue not just to talk the talk, but also walk the walk of pluralism, to the degree that we do, that shrinking of the tent that we identified previously, I think has been all too common in Jewish spaces and is pernicious. And to the degree, for example, I mentioned the generational divide informing in part some of the contrasts between us and them, however that might be defined. And I do want to note that, for example, on critical issues to the Jewish people, the younger generation does not embody some of the same priorities or even values as we might, and certainly our institutions do. And when we respond to that emerging reality by flagellating ourselves and saying, if only we had taught them better, we fail, it doesn't take seriously either the depth of the contrast, the depth of the challenge, or, as far as I'm concerned, the depth of the opportunity that we have to become an even stronger people, were we actually capable of adapting to these new realities by drawing upon the wisdom of younger people and drawing on the wisdom of the other, whatever the other might be, as opposed to simply rejecting it.
There could not be a more perfect note to end on. Stephen, thank you so much for that. And thank you to all of you for your answers. I'm looking at the questions that had been caught in the panel. And at the end of the day, your answers here answer all of them, which is to be able to say, even as leaders and even as educators, sometimes the answer is, I don't know. And all I can do is continue to listen and hear and be part of the conversation. Whether it is that our denominational identities are no longer serving the ways that we're thinking about how to move forward, or where our political divides or geographical or generational divides are so wide that we don't always know how to move forward collectively. I think what we have heard here reminds us why pluralism matters. And it's not always because we agree, but because we are willing to learn together. And we are willing, and pluralism brings that humility of not only being an educator, but always being a learner. And so I want to thank you all so much for helping us model that so powerfully today. Thank you to Yaffa for being the inspiration for a topic such as this one, because we both honor this community and honor Yaffa in continuing to show up at that table and continuing to being part of difference that helps us thrive and grow instead of divide. Thank you so much for this conversation today. I'm grateful to you all. I'm going to pass the baton back to David Singer.
Thank you all for that incredibly rich and thoughtful conversation. And thank you, Eliana, for moderating it so perfectly. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that what we just heard really goes straight to the heart of why Limmud exists. Right? This conversation about pluralism and leadership, about what it takes to hold communities together across real difference is not theoretical for us. It's not aspirational. It's the daily work of enriching Jewish communities by creating spaces where people learn with one another and not just next to one another. And it's also a perfect bridge to why we're here today to honor Yaffa. Because if today has taught us anything, it's that pluralism doesn't live in mission statements alone. Right? It lives in people, in choices, in relationships built patiently over time. Yaffa Epstein has been one of those people for Limmud for almost 2 decades. And Yaffa, I'm going to ask you to join me on screen, but you're not going to have a choice. You're going to get put on screen. There you are. Hi. Yaffa, seeing you here, surrounded by so many people whose lives you've touched, it feels exactly right. Over more than 18 years of leadership, teaching, and service, Yaffa has shaped Limmud not through roles or through titles, but through your presence, through how she listens, through how she asks questions, through how she insists again and again that complexity is not something to be feared, but something to be honored. Yaffa has been a teacher in the deepest sense of the word, not someone who tells people what to think, but someone who helps them learn how to think and how to stay in relationship when it would be easier to walk away. She models what it looks like to hold conviction without rigidity, to lead without flattening difference, and to believe fiercely that Jewish life is stronger when it makes room for many perspectives, not fewer. For Limmud, Yaffa has been a standard bearer and a reminder of what this work looks like when it's done with integrity and with heart. And if I may, for me personally, Yaffa, you have been a mentor, a supporter, and a just absolutely remarkable partner all along the way. Thank you. Organizations are shaped not just by their visions, but by the people who insist that those visions be lived out consistently, even when it's difficult. And Yaffa has been one of those people for us. It's no accident that as we think about the next chapter of our work, how we support educators, cultivate pluralistic leadership, and help communities navigate an increasingly polarized world, that we keep returning to the very values that Yaffa has so embodied so fully. In fact, Yaffa's leadership has directly inspired the new initiative that we are developing, in which everyone's generosity in advance of this event has helped to fund, focused on preparing the next generation of rabbinic leaders to do this work with courage, skill, and moral clarity. You'll hear more about that soon. But before I say anything more, I want you to hear from others. Mine is just one voice. And one of the hallmarks of pluralism, of Yaffa's pluralism, certainly, is that no single voice tells the whole story. So now let's hear a few others reflect on Yaffa and her impact, each in 6 words or less.
Inspired lifelong Jewish learning.
You bring Torah to life, Yaffa.
Yaffa, my
I apologize for that. I think we're going to try and play it again with the video this time.
empathetic.
Inspired lifelong Jewish learning.
You bring Torah to life, Yaffa.
Yaffa, my teacher, filled with love.
Authentic, likable, compassionate, empathetic, articulate, influential.
Sacred learning, holy mischief, dear friend.
Yaffa's beautiful and not only skin deep.
Yaffa, authentically compelling, inspiring and inviting, our charismatic friend.
Yaffa, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your generosity of spirit and unbridled passion for the Jewish people. Oh, look at all these little love. Thank you for showing us again and again what it means to lead with depth, humility, and courage. I'd like to invite everyone, all of you here, wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in, to raise your glass, your Limmud lemonade, your pluralism punch, your Yaffa Yaktail, a mug, a water bottle, and please join me in this virtual toast. Look at that. Look at this. This is beautiful. To Yaffa Epstein, our teacher, leader, friend, and exemplar of pluralism lived with integrity. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Hi, everyone. It's been very difficult to sit quietly through all this. I just want to tell you, for me, so much to say, and I want to respond. First of all, just tremendous gratitude. There's going to be a lot of gratitude. I know there's a lot of thank yous, but I have to say them all also. So there's going to be tremendous gratitude. I was sitting here just with tears in my eyes and my full heart with just so much thanks to you all for being here, to this beautiful, beautiful conversation, and all of the beautiful words you said about me, but really just how we are honoring the value of pluralism and the difficulty. I'm very grateful that we raised that and how hard it really, really is. It's not easy. I wrote my remarks because otherwise I'm going to cry. So just please, you know that I would rather just talk to you all normally, but I'm just going to read what I wrote because otherwise I won't get through it. So I'm incredibly grateful and privileged for this immense honor and for the chance for all of us to honor the idea that Jewish learning is the vehicle through which we build community and transform lives. It is difficult to put into words how much Limmud North America and the global Limmud movement means to me as a rabbi, an educator, a Jew, and a human being. Because through this movement, I have encountered people I never would have encountered otherwise. People from different denominations of Judaism, people from different religions, people from different political affiliations, different sexual orientations, different races, different geographic locations. And it is not an exaggeration to say I have seen North America and the world through Limmud. At my first Limmud in 2007, I met one of my personal Torah heroes, Daniel Boyarin, the last time he agreed to go. And I met one of my personal feminist heroes, Judith Plaskow. And that was it. I was hooked. I've pushed myself out of my comfort zone, attended drum circles, uncomfortable comedy sessions, and I even snuck into my first Friday night renewal service. Thank you, David Ingber. I have made lifelong friends and colleagues. I have had the immense honor of teaching thousands of people Torah, and I have had the immense honor of asking people to spend time in Chavruta with virtual strangers so they could learn something they'd never learned before from someone they'd never met before. So if you and I met at a Limmud event, whether in a session, at a late night song circle, in a hallway, over a meal, or at 2 a.m. during that very particular Limmud moment where you suddenly realize you're having a life-changing conversation while holding a paper cup of coffee, please use your react button, choose the heart, and add some love to our screens. Just want to see you all. If I met you at a Limmud, can I just see your love? There you are. Hi, so many of you. See that, my friends? So many of you. Actually, Rav Linzer, we did meet at a Limmud. You know that? Limmud, New York, 2011. Okay. So let me offer some gratitude to you all for being a part of the movement. And to Rabbi David Singer, Executive Director of Limmud North America, who leads with vision, integrity, and phenomenally positive, and that's a very hard word, phenomenally positive attitude. It is not easy being a sole professional. David, you hold so much with such steadiness and such heart. Thank you to my fellow board members. I have learned so much from you, and it has been a privilege to work with people so dedicated to creating transformative community through learning. Thank you to our incredible panelists, my teachers, my mentors, Rabbi Leon Morris, Rabbi Elke Abrahamson, and Steve Jacobson. Your leadership and the institution you've built and sustained have helped make me the pluralist I am. Elke, you asked how. It's these institutions. At Pardes, I learned that pluralism can feel like comfort. Dorot taught me pluralism demands discomfort. And Wexner taught me how to help other people become capable of living inside their own productive discomfort. A special shout out to my dear colleague and friend, Rabbi Dr. Tali Zelkowitz, my fellow Vancouverite female rabbi, my partner in crime at Wexner in creating the Wexner Heritage Applied Pluralism course, where we actually studied what pluralism can mean and how we do it. Thank you to our amazing moderator and former board chair, Eliana Leader. You stepped in at the last moment to moderate this panel with depth and expertise. You are an incredible leader who I learned so much from. Thank you to the event co-hosts, Shep Rosenman and Donna Friedman-Meyer, people who use their brilliance, their dedication, and in our world, one of the most precious resources of all, their time, to help the Jewish people and to help grow diversity, pluralism, and access to Torah. Thank you to our host committee, so many dear friends. I'm so grateful to you all for being a part of this event. Thank you to all of you who gave so generously and who attended today. Your generosity is not only a gift, it is a statement of values. It says Jewish learning matters, diverse Jewish community matters. And to my family, to Shimi, who's now with our daughter, my greatest support and my partner in the daily sacred work of making our home a place where people are welcomed and treated with human dignity. I thank God every day for you. To our daughter, Yakira Ora Simcha, who reminds me daily that the world is a magical place and goodness is worth fighting for. And Elke, you asked about how I became a pluralist. it's all about my parents, Eddie and Judy Epstein, calling in from Israel, who first taught me the value of pluralism, who taught me a Jew is a Jew is a Jew, and all are welcome at our table. To my in-laws, thank you for your love, support, and always showing up again and again. To my siblings-in-law, thank you for being our greatest allies and dear friends, and to all of Shimi's extended family who's here, and to my dear siblings who are unable to be here, and to all my dear friends and teachers and bosses who are here with us today for all your love and support. I want to give a special shout out to my Jewish Education Project family who's here and all of your support and love, and for creating a beautiful place for educators to learn how to do pluralism. And now for some Torah. That's what we're really here for. In Breshit Rabbah 8:5, we are brought into the moment right before God creates the human being. In that moment, God does something surprising. God engages the ministering angels in conversation. Should the human being be created or not? Some angels say yes. Chesed, loving kindness, says yes. Tzedek, justice, says yes, because human beings will do acts of kindness and of justice. But others argue no. Emet, truth, says no, because human beings are made of lies. Shalom, peace, says no, because human beings are full of fighting. Emet and Shalom take an absolutist position that even if the human being will do acts of kindness and justice, at their core they are human and thus unable to be completely truthful and peaceful. It goes against their essential nature. God, however, does not agree. God responds in the most dramatic way. God takes truth, Emet, and throws truth to the ground, banishing truth from heaven, requiring truth to grow up from the ground if truth wishes to return. This midrash is gorgeous for many reasons, but the one that I want to come back to again and again is that it teaches us that the truth that we have down here on earth is by definition limited, imperfect, human. This is what, Leon, you quoted from Rabbi Sachs. And that fact demands something from us. It demands that when you believe that we're right, when we believe that we're right, when we feel certain, we have to hold that certainty with humility, with doubt. Because by definition, we are never holding the whole truth. At most, we hold a piece of the truth, a piece of the divine. And if we want a fuller picture, if we want our truths to become more complete, more robust, more real, we have to engage people whose truth is different than our own. We have to learn Torah together. We have to stay in conversation. That is the only way our truth can grow up from the ground. And that is why Limmud is so sacred to me, and all these institutions are so sacred to me, because Limmud isn't simply a place where we allow difference. Limmud is a place that insists difference is not a threat to Torah. Difference is one of the ways Torah becomes bigger. This is the spiritual discipline of saying, I am responsible for my learning, and I'm responsible for the way I treat your learning. And that matters, especially in these times when absolutism and tyranny are prevalent. The instinct is to circle the wagons, close the door, seal the tent. But that is not the answer. For the past few weeks, we've been reading the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus story. We read about Pharaoh, about the hardening of his heart, a leader clinging to control, clinging to power, clinging to tyranny. Tyranny, the belief that there is only one legitimate story, one legitimate way to be in community, and everyone else must submit. Tyranny is what happens when difference is treated as danger. And that is why pluralism is not a luxury. It's not nice. It's not cute. It's not Pollyannish. It is protection. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, our teacher, to whom we all owe a huge debt, and the true Rebbe of global Jewish pluralism, teaches that creating the conditions of pluralism is the most prevalent and effective method of preventing pathological absolutism from rearing its head. Pluralism is how we defend against tyranny. Pluralism is the refusal to let any single human being or group or ideology claim, I am the whole truth. It doesn't mean we don't have convictions. Pluralism means we hold our convictions with enough humility to remember that other people created by B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, may have access to truths we don't. Pluralism is the courage to stay in relationship when it would be easier to retreat into certainty. And here is where Limmud does something absolutely remarkable. It takes that big idea and turns it into lived experience. This is the how that we've been talking about. It allows us to learn how to practice pluralism. This was fundamental to me in my own growth as a Jewish educator and rabbi, and that is why I'm so excited that we're launching this new rabbinic fellowship. This fellowship will bring rabbinical students from different backgrounds together for a year-long experience where they will encounter one another, learn together, and then bring that learning on the road, teaching at Limmud events across North America. We're not only talking about pluralism, we're investing in the next generation of rabbis and of leaders who can actually practice pluralism, who can build relationships across difference, teach across difference, and lead communities that do not collapse when we disagree. We are training spiritual leaders who know how to stay in the conversation. And I want to say this with real clarity. This is not only good for the Jewish community. This is what protects human dignity. So I want to offer a simple invitation. Wherever you are, bring your Torah. Bring your questions, bring your commitments, and bring your humility. And when you encounter someone whose Judaism doesn't look like yours, or sound like yours, or vote like yours, or pray like yours, pause and ask yourself, what if this is not a threat? What if this is part of what God hoped for all along? May each of us continue to practice pluralism and insist that Torah and truth are not owned by any one of us, but that we are all better when we learn from one another. May Limmud North America continue to be a laboratory for that kind of Jewish life, a Judaism that is brave and rigorous and deeply diverse. Thank you all so much for all that you do to make this happen. So grateful to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Yaffa. That was stunning. Really appreciate you, and it's such a fabulous way of reminding everyone why you are this year's honoree and are helping us build the future. And I'm just going to get into the next part of the event, and nobody really knows what it is. I'm a lawyer by trade and a musician all of the time. So here we go. We want to thank you all for showing up here. Learn a bit of Torah, drink some water, tequila or beer. Beer. A virtual gala is often dreary. That's why our theory is to keep this cheery. A bit of pluralism is a great way to start off the year. We want to thank you all for honoring Yaffa. There's not a lot that rhymes with that except maybe matzah. Every one of us sees her as the absolute best. If you know Yaffa, you are truly blessed. We love her brand of Torah, hearts and minds, doing the Horah. We love you, Yaffa, our rabbi, our teacher, our friend. We love you, Yaffa, we're loyal to you till the end. Now, let's get down. Now, how does that happen? Now, that's why. Now, let's get down to brass tacks. Before we hit the climax, I hope you think I'm funny. I'm really here to ask you for your money. Limmud NA needs you more this year. Our programs and scholarships are the tip of the spear. This virtual gala needs to raise some cheddar, a clever way to make community better. So let's honor our treasure and let Yaffa know how we're gonna fed her. And yes, David, you can finally put the link in the chat. We love you, Yaffa, our rabbi, our teacher, our friend. We love you, Yaffa, we're loyal to you till the end. We love you, Yaffa. Okay, so from the ridiculous to the sublime, or the sublime to the ridiculous, take your pick. Seriously, folks, now comes the part that I warned you about in the song. Just picture it. My guitar case is open in front of me. We're in a subway station. You can tell I'm from New York. And instead of asking you for your loose change or your singles, I'm a busker singing to you about changing the way we encounter one another and inviting you to take ownership of that in true Limmud fashion by helping make it real. So as I sang earlier, thank you. Because of you and this delightfully daytime drinking Zoom gala, Zoom gala, we've already raised over $40,000 towards our $50,000 goal. And why? It's to launch this new pluralistic rabbinic training program in Yaffa's honor. That's incredible, and it means we're really close. So here's the slightly less musical part of the show. Although I can sing this next bit if you like. There's a minimum donation required for a private. Am I kidding? I'm not sure. Let's see about that. If you haven't yet given, or if you can stretch just a bit further or a lot further without breaking a tendon, now's the moment. The link's in the chat. The link's in the chat, the link's in the chat. Or if you've already pitched in, you can pledge to renew your gift next year. It's a 2-year program. That kind of second-year support is what truly sustains this program's future. Both options are live right now. So grab your drink. The more you drink, the more you click the link, and help us make one last push to cross the finish line together. Let's see if we can get over the $50,000 mark. Thank you for believing in this work, for helping us finish strong, and for proving that fundraising over Zoom can, in fact, be fun. It certainly was for me, though I'll admit playing guitar and the tequila didn't hurt. Mazel tov.
I have no words. For Shep, for Yaffa, for our panel, for David. I'm basically just the gratitude chair of the night or the day. So really, thank you to all of you who have stepped up today to help support Limmud North America and the critical work that we have to do. Again, thank you to Eliana, to Steve, to Leon, to Elka for sharing your wisdom and perspectives with us and truly inspiring us to action. Thank you to David for envisioning and producing this meaningful event, and to our tech support, Kelsey, for helping it all go so smoothly. And most importantly, a huge and heartfelt thank you to you, Yaffa, for as always inspiring us, moving us, and challenging us to reach higher and deeper to meet this moment with our full hearts and minds and souls. Mazel tov. And finally, in true Yaffa spirit, we invite you all to sign off today by sharing a blessing for Yaffa, for our community, or for our deeply troubled world, a world so in need of our blessings. And with that, shalom, shalom, and lehitraot. We really do hope to see you at one of our upcoming festivals of Jewish learning soon. May we all bring our small sticks of fire to help us build that huge, powerful frame. Please feel free to come off mute and say goodbye to one another. And again, thank you. Toda Rabba.
Bye all. Thank you and Mazel Tov.
Bravo to all. It's really been fantastic, very moving. Bravo, Yaffa, and bravo, Limmud, and everyone else.
Thank you so much.
Yaffa, I think
Yaffa,
bracha actually rhymes with your name no matter what.
Wish I'd spoken to you before I wrote the song or before I played it.
I think we could go. Okay.
Again, thank you all so much for being here.
Thank
We'll
you.
leave the chat open if
Love
people
you all. Thank you.
else.
We love Yaffa and Shimmy.
Love you. Love you.
Love you.